Welcome to the Unearthed Man Podcast, the journey of becoming a conscious man, hosted by Milvo. Hey all, Milvo here, and welcome to Season 2 of the Unearthed Man Podcast. This is now episode 28, and I must say I'm super excited to be back in podcast land. The 6-month break was amazing, and I'll definitely be talking into the 6 month, why I took the time off and what that looked like. But I'm certainly now fully energized, recovered, reconnected, and just super excited to get back into the podcast. One of the things that I'm going to do differently this year with the podcast, and I'll do that now before kicking off, is I'd just like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which this podcast is being recorded. I pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and future. There's a reason in behind doing that, and there's a reason why I actually also haven't named the actual landowners. Where I do live, the landowners haven't been formally recognised as of yet. I'm hoping that it does take place reasonably soon. So until that actually happens, I will just acknowledge all our First Nations peoples and the landowners of many of the different areas across all of Australia. So what's been going on? 2020, as we all know, huge year for everybody. There was a lot of different energy in the space, a lot that was taking place. For me, 2020 was just an amazing year of growth, reconnection, a lot of self-development work, but then also a lot of understanding how my ego was playing into that. So, from a self-development point of view, you can often develop if you like, the self, but sometimes that's the little self and the egoic self. But you have to go through that process. I've been now further on a journey of working out where does my ego play, where do my shadows play, and going back more to just trying to observe where I am sitting in relation to ego, my shadows. So where I'm reacting, is that a part of me that I just haven't dealt with yet? An amazing piece I saw yesterday on Instagram was from Stefanos Safandos. He put out there about the fact of how he had reacted to his partner, and it really touched with me because I feel that there's a whole part of me that really struggles with criticism, and when I look back, I feel there's a lot of pressure. I know there's a lot of pressure when I was growing up to succeed, I think, and just be successful. My dad was an ultimate perfectionist. I love my dad, but he was an absolute perfectionist, and there was a view about, what was good enough, and if I hadn't quite achieved what I felt was good enough, then, I received probably some pressure and criticism, maybe on the home front. There was always that, trying to be better than my brothers and everything else. So now when something comes up where I may not have done something perfectly and someone questions me on it, then I do feel that there is a reaction that I have, and that's clearly a part of a shadow and a part of my childhood that I still need to work into and be aware of. So very grateful for Steph for putting that out yesterday on Instagram, because those things are really poignant for us to sit back and actually go, is that really happening with me? So yes, 2020 was rather large because I went on a growth journey. We launched the podcast, ran some men's programs, and working in the corporate environment I do on large projects, there was a lot of stress, perceived stress. Stress is always perceived, and that's where I've landed as well, in a really good spot now about whether I'm creating the stress myself. But, there's a lot of maybe what you could call external pressure. It's about how you internally deal with that pressure. And I knew coming into the first 6 months of this year that, purely from a project point of view and a professional point of view, I was going to be working in the order of 6 to 8 weekends, doing shifts between midnight and 8 a.m., and that was a lot that was actually going to be going on. And so I had to make a choice as to would I continue to try to do my day job, my professional job, which was 8 to 10 hours plus weekends. So there was times I actually worked 14 days straight, or would I actually be able to balance that plus with all the other Unearthed Man stuff. So I decided to put the Unearthed Man stuff just on a hold, on the background. But the other element of that too is that I talked a lot into videos and a lot of things last year about how we can live life and what life should look like for us all. And the question was I actually doing all that myself? Was I actually living life? Was I allowing what was happening in the energies of the world and, the pandemics and everything that was going on and the rabbit holes? Was I allowing that to drag me down, or was I actually saying, look, I'm going to look at myself and I'm going to sit above that and I'm just going to live my life? So I did. I made a conscious choice that whilst I was doing a lot in the professional workspace, that I would then actually also look at my own personal life and make sure I was absolutely just living life to the fullest. And there were some things that we really wanted to do. So one of the things that I did, joined into a program called Nectar of the Gods, Panthera Soul, Cacao Nectar of the Gods with Brendan Durrell. Now, Brendan was on episode 16 of the podcast, a beautiful man. And he ran a program about cacao and how that was seen in 4,000 or 5,000 years ago in Mayan cultures, how it was actually seen as an actual nectar that the gods would use, or how it was offered up and how we could use it, and how a lot of that works in our lives in relation to how it triggers dopamine in the brain, how it actually opens up our hearts, how you can have that as a replacement for coffee. So really immersed ourselves into that. And there's also a lot of, again, shadow work and breath work as part of that program, and love that. So we got an immense amount out of that program, to the point where even today, every morning, the ritual is to sit down and actually have a beautiful cup of just cacao, no other additives in it, so no sugars, no oils, just the cacao as it actually comes. We're now back using Samoan cacao, more local to where we are down in the southern hemisphere, and really enjoy that. And basically I have that in the morning, and I probably then eat about lunchtime, because I just get so much just normal, natural energy from that. It also helps me live a very peaceful, calm, relaxed way of operating. So there's a lot of beautiful benefits come out of that. Moving into early 2021, I wanted to get back more into the creative side of myself. So sat down and organised myself and my beautiful wife Jackie to do two things. One, we went to indeed a pottery class, so actually creating cups and bowls on a wheel, getting your hands dirty in the clay, but really connecting back into that feel of earth, the clay, creating something with your own hands. And it was a 2 or 3 hour workshop, and I just found myself almost in this meditative state, just totally just immersed in what I was doing, fully present, putting my whole heart, my energy, everything was, my focus was just purely into these cups that we created. And I'm really proud of what I came out with, given I'd never done it before. I actually had some cups that are actually quite usable, and we do use them on a regular basis. The other area which I know that I'm not great at is art and being able to paint. And again, I think this is a part that stems all the way back when I was doing art, that I was probably a C or D student. My artwork was never seen as great. And again, teachers' view about how you operate, so you hold a lot of stories. So we signed up and went and did an art class and sat down. Admittedly, it's called Cork and Canvas, so my wife got to have a few drinks and we sat there with some food, but we painted these lion's heads. And even when I look at it now, I'm going, actually, I'm proud of the work I've done. Given that I don't paint, I don't understand painting, I don't understand how you mix colours, and that's not really my forte, but how it's come out, is it perfect? No. But it's perfect in its imperfection, because, again, I was just tapping into my full creativity when doing that. So that was just awesome to be able to do those. From a program point of view, we did Initiation Back to Self with Sam Lewis, who was on episode 5 of the podcast last year, which was that first really dropping in, but I hadn't progressed far enough on my own journey to completely understand the separation and how you can actually think about duality and universal laws and how we can actually see some things. So this year we revisited that program again with Sam, and I took so much out of it. Just a whole lot of way of learning to become the observer of who I am, to go back and understand who my true self is and observe when the emotions are coming up. Not stopping them, observe them, be aware of them, allow them to pass through my body, and just understand that they don't define who I am. They are just a transient state that is happening, and that I get to be able to move on, and I kind of sit above that and just be an observer of that. So I've really took a lot more out of this program, and again, on how I operate and how I see things and how I interact with the people around me is now fundamentally different, because I can just now be more of an observer of me observing those people. And it's a really interesting space to live in. I've been reading some books around the untethered soul and, a surrender experiment, and some elements about how, again, you can detach out. So I highly recommend delving into those spaces. Also, the Amend movement, which I really love. There's a Melbourne-based group down here, which I've got some good connections with, but the guys that run the Amend movement, so, Wah and Tu, I got some of the couple of amazing guys. They came down and ran a workshop down here, and again, I spent all day immersing myself, doing breath work, crying most of the time. And there's a couple of things that I hadn't actually dealt with, some abandonment issues, and also some issues around my dad and how I'd seen some things. So there were some really powerful themes that came out, and spent an immense amount of time releasing a lot of sadness and a lot of emotion, and probably a lot of pain, a lot of hurt. But again, coming off the back of that, I just felt re-energized and even lighter than what I'd actually felt before, because I was now retouching back into some of those elements that I had suppressed, or I chose not to actually look at. So again, I can only put out there, do programs, do the work on yourself. We could do all these other certificates and, technical certificates and everything else, which everyone's been doing during these lockdown phases. I see it on LinkedIn all the time of, I've achieved this certification, I've achieved that certification, I've put all this money into these professional aspects of our lives. What I'm not seeing is people putting the time into their personal aspect of their life and actually understanding, what that means for them, and being able to not suppress all these emotions and all these interactions we've had with others that we sort of hold in because we don't really seem to be putting that out there. The more that we can release those, the whole lot in relation to health, wealth, spirituality, it just starts to open up. Your heart opens up, and there's so much more to come from that. And as I interview men, as we go through this year, there'll be a whole lot that will come up about that as well. So that's some of the things I've been doing. On top of that, I've done some amazing trips. It was my wife's, our anniversary. It was in March. I was working on the weekends, but still chose. Went and stayed at a hotel in the city and had a beautiful weekend in the city at an amazing hotel. But we booked a getaway about 4 hours out of where we live in Melbourne, and it was effectively as close to off channel or off grid as you can get. So both places never had any power, bottled gas, and we pretty much lived for 3 days. As soon as it got dark, there was no lights, maybe a bit of solar lighting, but that was about it. And it was just beautiful to be off grid because we were just so connected, able to run around effectively naked, which was beautiful as well, because then you're standing naked in nature, and just being able to really fully connect. One was in a yurt. So a yurt's a Mongolian hut. They'd imported them into Australia and set that up, which is good. And the other one was just a wooden cabin. I was also able to take my camera. I love photography, as everyone, I've just relaunched my website and I've put all my photography out there on the website. So there's photos of that journey up on there. It was, again, a great opportunity just to reconnect and understand where I am and who I am and what my life looks like, and how minimalist you can actually live and operate and still just be. And that was just an awesome way to disconnect from all the what was going on around us, because the energies in the bush, the animals that were there didn't care, the birds that were there didn't care, the sheep that were walking around didn't care. They had no concept of all this other craziness and fear and chaos that was going on around them. It's something we've generated as humans, and to be able to just completely disconnect and be involved and live in their world was amazing. The other thing we did, we have a beautiful friend, Erin Murphy, that lives in Canberra. Over Easter weekend, hopped in the car, drove the 9 hours to get to Canberra, spent the weekend with Erin, and then drove back again. Again, spending time with beautiful wife Jackie in the car. We got to talk about a whole lot of things that were important to us. I listened to some audio books, and again, it's just no excuses. Just hop in the car and drive. There's amazing places if you want to just hop in the car and drive around Australia. And then one of the other just incredible trips, we took a whole week off, left on the Saturday, got back on the following Sunday, and drove to a place called Port Lincoln, which is over in South Australia. Sole purpose of going all the way over there was to go shark cage diving. So we booked into this tour. In the morning, we actually stopped at one island where there's a whole lot of sea lions. Basically, we were able to get in the water and just snorkel around with sea lions, just free swimming around you. They were as intrigued as to what we were, as to what they were. And it's just, again, you're just immersed in this beautiful islands, 40 kilometres off Australia, and just cruising around with these amazing sea lions who were just curious and swimming around and, up and down out of the water. And that was just a really heart-touching moment. And then we went further down and searched for basically some great white sharks. We hopped in the cage. Unfortunately, no sharks appeared. The sharks hadn't been around for a while, and we knew there's always a risk. But, hundreds of fish were around us, hundreds of trevally, kingfish just swimming all around us. And just, again, to experience that trip was great. Came back, saw great family, friends, went to some wineries, just took our time and just had, again, just amazing, beautiful adventure. So just we're living in the moment. We went to one of the beaches on the way back. It's just massive sand dunes. And so, stopped, went there, ran up and down these sand dunes, just played like children. And again, just to see something that is so unique to a certain part of Australia that you don't see in other parts was again, just a beautiful, amazing experience. From there, our daughter had decided to relocate to Cairns, moved up there around March this year. So another excuse for a trip. So we hopped on a plane and flew into Cairns and got to spend a week with our daughter up again, Northern Australia. And just, again, living life up there. We booked onto a snorkeling diving tour, went out to the Great Barrier Reef, got to snorkel, which is just amazing. And I got to see a wobbegong shark. Wobbegongs, if you don't know, are pretty much bury themselves in the sand, hide in a cave, down in the sand, and just basically lure fish into the cave. And as they come in, they just pretty much vacuum them into their mouth. So they're just amazing. When you look at the video, when I look back, I could see this shark. But when you look back on the video, when you pause it, you cannot tell where the shark is compared to the coral. Its camouflage is just incredible. But to have been able to witness and see such a shy shark was just an amazing experience. So in all these trips where I wanted to call in a shark, I actually got to call in a very unique shark, and it actually happened. So it may not have happened because a great white in Port Lincoln, but I certainly got to see this beautiful shark, which a lot of people don't get to see up in the Great Barrier Reef. And then we did something that both my wife and I had been challenged with before, which is diving. We both had experiences that weren't pleasant, and we'd held on to those, but we thought we'd give it a try. So we got down 8 meters. We both beautifully survived, realized that, this is something we could do, and it's something we're now going to explore moving forward as to what that looks like for us. So that's really what we've been doing. We have just been living life. And in the background then, just been doing lots of reading, lots of different reading. And some of the stuff I've actually have been reading is there's a First Knowledges book. There's a book series come out. One's on songlines, which is talks into the Dreamtime stories that at our Indigenous culture have, and the other one's called Design, and it talks about how the Indigenous lived and how they designed their homes and how they designed how they lived in and around Australia. And this is all pre-settlement or pre-us, the white people turning up and effectively stealing the land and taking over the land. I've also read an amazing book called Dark Emu, which again talks about what everything looked like pre-1788. So I would highly recommend that everyone starts to do this level of reading, and I don't understand why it's not in our education system. I'm hoping it is. I may be too far removed from the education system, but if it's not, these got to be mandatory books. We have to learn more about the 40,000 plus year history and culture and the way that the First Nations peoples looked after this land before we turned up and effectively have destroyed it. Crops used to grow now where there's red deserts. The amount of bird life, about how there was never these raging bushfires that we have today. They never existed because everything was correctly managed. Now, Australia was made up of, if you like, almost what Europe is, lots of little countries, lots of owners of parts of land across all of Australia. And that's what people say. When people talk to Indigenous or Aboriginal, they assume that they're just, one great big nation, but they weren't. They were made up of lots of different clans and lots of different owners of parts of land. But what they did understand is that how I looked after my part of my land and my part of country impacted every other part of the country. So I had to look at upstream, downstream, everywhere else. And if there was food or there was certain stuff that, food or crops or everything else that group had that other clans didn't. When everyone came together, there was actually the ability to share and trade, whether it be meats or crops or everything else. So it's so important that we learn how this land survived 40,000 plus years with the oldest culture in the world managing this land. And in 250 years, we've just been able to just destroy that, which is just, I really struggle with that myself, and I'm embarrassed the fact that I haven't known more about this up to date. And so it's something I'm certainly going to delve into and learn more about and become a student of, and just be able to listen and learn and listen and learn about what we can actually do and become an advocate of. And you'll see more of that as I'm going along with the people that I'll be interviewing and even the activities that I'll be undertaking. So that's sort of what's been happening and where it is. So in relation to the podcast, so let's get back into where we are now. So season 2, ta-da, here we are, we're up and running, episode 28. Last season, I saw it was really successful. I think when I last checked, there's 1,600 downloads, 27 countries, over 200 cities. People have listened to the podcast, which I'm blown away and just grateful and thankful for every beautiful person who chose to download and listen to, be it a single episode or multiple episodes. I just thank you. Thank you very much. So for me, I see my season 1, the launch of the Unearthed Men podcast, as being very successful from my personal perspective. What I did set myself was a goal of, I had amazing, I think it was about 16 or 17 people I interviewed last year, and every one of those were just beautiful, amazing men. What I wanted to do was to say, okay, now it's time. I really want to start to reach out. I want to get to a greater audience. I want to start to expand out the podcast. And there are some people who when you look at, within the men's space and within the spiritual space and the conscious space, who are just leaders and quite large leaders, globally on how they operate. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to start to reach out to them. The stories about why would they want to come on my little podcast were just all my stories. They don't know much about it. Why would they not want to support, if I'm here supporting the man and the messaging, why would they not want to come on board? So I parked those stories and I started to reach out. And the response has just been absolutely amazing from some of these people who are willing to come back on board. And it's really interesting when you put the story aside and you just have that leap of faith, say pretty much, fuck it, I'm just going to have a crack. You'd be amazed at what actually happens. So have a think about where else in your life are you choosing not to do something out of your own fear, as opposed to saying, fuck it, I'm just going to have a crack and let's just see what happens. And if that person says no, it's okay. It just wasn't right for them or wasn't right for you at that point in time. But you move on. They haven't rejected you as a person. they just didn't want to come onto that, and that was okay. But the people I've lined up and what it looks like for this year and over the next coming months for me is just simply amazing. So some of the men that I'll be interviewing over the next few months are Trevor Boehm from The Uncivilized Nation. He's got a book out called Man Uncivilized, which is one of the first books I've read. Go and read that book. The way he puts things, the way he operates is awesome. So I'm just super excited to have Trevor on board. As I spoke about earlier, Stefanos Safandos. So Steph, again, a leader in this area. He's just recently agreed to come on. Watine Wayenga from the Amen Movement, and Tu Wakatihi. They're also going to be coming on board. They were part of the workshop I did. They both said, yep, they'd be happy to come on board, and they're going to come on soon. Frankie Winterstein, ex-rugby league star, went and played both locally and internationally. Frankie's coming on board. He's doing some amazing stuff around, his own self-healing, but couples healing. Matt Sinkovitz, who's out of the US, is just doing some beautiful, amazing work around helping men move beyond their porn addictions. So they're just some of the men. And on top of that, and that's not taking away from some of these other guys who've signed on, like Aleki Schmeckel, Will Austin from Yarnbark, Lockie Samuel, Brad Cusworth, and Corey McCarthy. So again, there's just a dozen odd men already lined up, ready to go, that I'll be interviewing over the next few weeks. And they'll start to come on. You'll start to see those episodes coming through. So I am just super excited, absolutely super excited about what season 2 is going to look like on the podcast. And, we can only just keep going up from here. And it's all thankful to you as the listener, because if you're listening, I'm going to keep getting the content out there. I'm going to keep getting these amazing men on and get them to tell the story. And, if you take something out of it, under my mantra, if the right message will hit the right person at the right time, and that's just what this is all about. So, as I mentioned earlier, I have actually now started to re-educate myself and remove all of the conditioning I've had and all the previous belief systems about our nation's First Peoples and how they operated, survived, and lived for the 40,000 odd years before myself and our ancestors, my ancestors, your ancestors. If you're here in Australia and you're of a European, Western, or non-Indigenous background, then this is what our ancestors came to say. And effectively, we did steal it from them. Let's be very clear. There was no agreement. There was no signing on. There was no treaties. We turned up and said, we are now going to take over this land, and chose to operate as we think would operate without any real integration with our the First Nations people. As I said before, I'm actually quite embarrassed about my lack of knowledge and probably even, how I've perceived and seen some things. And I can only say I apologize directly and indirectly for anything that I've done. And I'm certainly looking to become an advocate and see what I can do to change how I go forward and change the perception of others around us. When this episode goes live, which will be effectively, on the 8th of July, it's in the middle of what's known as going to be NAIDOC week. Now, NAIDOC stands for the National Aborigines and Islanders Day Observance Committee. So there's a week every year which is about how they can help us as non-Indigenous learn and understand about, what we can do to reconnect and re-involve and get a better understanding and utilize this 40,000 years worth of knowledge back into how we live and how we operate. So where I now work, that's probably the other thing I didn't touch on. I've picked up a new job, but I'll touch on that soon. So where I work, we have an intranet site, and on that intranet site, they've actually got a page about NAIDOC. There's a whole statement that's set on there. Now, this statement is actually written from the perspective of Aborigines, Indigenous, the Torres Strait Islander people. So it comes from their perspective, and it's written as if one of them are talking to this. Now, I don't want to discredit or change it or flip it around. So I'm going to read out quote for quote exactly what this says. Now, the disclaimer, I am not claiming to be Indigenous nor having an Indigenous background. So this is actually me talking on behalf of them, which, I'm doing this from a perspective of an ally. And as I said, I'm not here to represent that I am Indigenous and I have a lot of learning to do, but I'm going to read out what was on our intranet site because I found it hugely powerful and I hope you do too. So the theme of NAIDOC Week this year is Heal Country, Heal Our Nation. Country is inherent to our identity. It sustains our lives in every aspect, spiritually, physically, emotionally, socially, and culturally. It is more than a place. When we talk about country, it is spoken of like a person. Country is family, kin, law, L-A-W, lore, L-O-R-E, ceremony, traditions, and language. For Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples, it has been this way since the dawn of time. Through our languages and songs, we speak to country. Through our ceremonies and traditions, we sing to and celebrate country, and country speak to us. Increasingly, we worry about country. For generations, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people have been calling for stronger measures to recognise, protect and maintain all aspects of our culture and heritage for all Australians. We have continued to seek greater protections for our lands, our waters, our sacred sites and our cultural heritage from exploitation, desecration and destruction. We are still waiting for those robust protections. Healing country means hearing those pleas to provide greater management, involvement and empowerment by Indigenous peoples over country. Healing country means embracing First Nations cultural knowledge and understanding of country as part of Australia's national heritage. That the culture and values of Aboriginal peoples and Torres Strait Islanders are respected equally to and the cultures and values of all Australians. The right to protect country and culture is fundamental. Destruction and desecration of our sacred lands or ancient sites, some of the oldest human occupation sites on the planet, is an enormous loss for both our nation and the world. But to truly heal country, we have more to do. Our lands will continue to burn from bushfires, droughts will continue to destroy our livelihoods without using traditional practices that have protected this country for centuries. For generations, our elders and communities have advocated, marched and fought for substantive institutional, structural and collaborative reform. The aspirations of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples are the culmination of generations of consultation and discussions among our nations on a range of issues and grievances. Healing country means finally resolving many of the outstanding injustices which impact on the lives of our people. It must be a fair and equitable resolution. Fundamental grievances will not vanish. In the European settlement of Australia, there were no treaties, no formal settlements, no compacts. Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people therefore did not cede sovereignty to our land. It was taken from us. That will remain a continuing source of dispute. To heal country, we must properly work towards redressing historical injustice. While we can't change history through telling the truth about our nation's past, we certainly can change the way history is viewed. After 250 years, our children and our future generations deserve better. For generations, we have repeatedly called for just recognition of our right to participate on an equal basis in economic and social terms. Yet such participation cannot be successful unless, first, there is formal recognition that Indigenous people have been dispossessed, and second, definite specific steps are taken to redress the grave social and economic disadvantage that followed that dispossession. Healing country is more than changing a word in our national anthem. It's about the historical, political and administrative landscapes adapting to successfully empower and celebrate Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities, nations and heritage. We are all looking for significant and lasting change. We cannot afford to let pass the very real opportunity that now presents itself for reform based on the fundamental change in the relationship Australia has with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. Heal country, heal our nation. I just want to let that sink in, and I would strongly encourage that you actually go back and replay that section. For me, I feel it brings up a lot of emotion for me when I read that, because I feel the hurt that we've done to our First Nations people. you can read in there the hurt, the energy, the anger, the frustration of what we've taken away from these beautiful people who looked after, managed, manicured, supported the land that we live on. One of the things that I took out from some of the readings that I'd previously done around this was the thing about country is that the Indigenous do not differentiate between animate and inanimate objects. They are all the same. They are all on the same equal level. They are all on equal footing. Simple things like when the Indigenous go to create their cultural artifacts, be it boomerangs, clapsticks, what we call didgeridoo, but yidikis, they first actually seek permission from the tree to say, can I use part of you to create this? They don't just go and chop down the tree. They actually touch and speak and feel into the energy of the tree. If they don't feel it's right, if the tree, all the stones, all the rocks that they want to use for other influence don't give the permission back through the energy, then they move on to the next one. We don't do that. As a westernized white culture, we are about quick, easy, throwaway. We don't seek gratification. We don't have gratitude. We don't seek permission. We just assume that everything is there for our taking. It's something we have to change, and we have to fundamentally change. And this isn't Australia, right? What I read out there, you could probably take on board for any Indigenous culture that used to live on a land before it was settled by Europeans and Westerners. Any land, you would probably get a very similar message. So this, as much as this is very unique, those wordings to what's here in Australia, just think about this across all lands, all the countries across the world. Have a think about who your Indigenous people are, and have a think about what would they say. Would they read that and have the exact same feelings about that's how they feel about what's happened to their land? And I guess the answer would be probably yes. As a nation, and I'm talking about the Earth nation, as a global nation, we now have an opportunity to right wrongs of the past and have ways to actually move forward for that. So anyway, I'm going to end on that note. So here we are, episode 28. I'm back. We are back. The podcast is back up and running. As I said, I got some amazing, beautiful men that have signed on to come on board, local and international. It's going to be an amazing 6 months. The podcast, again, will run between this episode, 8th of July is the launch date for this episode. We'll run through again to early December, and I'll reassess how my energy is at the end of the year as to whether I just do rolling 6 months or we end up with a 12-month set of podcasts going into next year. So where you can find me, like all channels, I'm definitely there on Facebook, but I've dropped off my Unearthed Man page on Facebook, so you just find me under Stephen Milverton. You can find me on Instagram, Unearthed Man. You can find me within LinkedIn, either Stephen Milverton or the Unearthed Man page within LinkedIn. All the content will be going up there. I'll be putting more content back out again, probably doing series of things, so probably 2 to 3 parts of video series about certain larger topics rather than just individual topics, so that'll be coming along. So that's where you can find me. The website, www.theunearthedman.com. A lot of content's on there. The podcast is on there. If you have any questions, there's a contact page on the website, so feel free to jump in and just reach out and contact, or via Instagram message, Facebook message, or even LinkedIn message. I can be on the channel. So that's it. Wrap up of episode 28, commencement of season 2. I'm looking forward to interacting with everybody over the next 6 months at a minimum, and we'll see how we go there. So for today, much love and peace, and have a beautiful day. Goodbye.